Woman quits her job at 58 with $680,000 saved. Everyone tells her she's crazy. Too early, not enough money. She needs to work until at least 65. 7 years later, at 65, her account's worth $920,000, and she's been living comfortably the entire time without a paycheck. Different guy works until 67 because the calculator said he needed $1.2 million to retire safely. Gets there, finally retires, dies at 71. Worked 9 extra years for money he used for 4. Third person retires at 56 with only $520,000. Friends think he's insane. You'll run out of money by 65, they say. He's now 68, still going strong, account's worth $580,000, and he's been fishing 3 days a week for 12 years. Here's the question that's going to haunt you. How many years of your life are you trading for security you don't actually need? And what's that really costing you? I'm going to show you the math that reveals why working past 58 is probably the worst financial decision you'll ever make, even though it feels like the responsible choice. This isn't about being reckless or gambling with your future. This is about understanding that every year you work past the point of enough isn't buying you more security. It's just converting your remaining healthy years into money you'll likely never spend. The system is designed to keep you working longer than necessary. Let's talk about what enough actually means and why you probably hit it years ago. Before we get into the specific math that proves you can probably retire earlier than you think, if you're tired of retirement advice that assumes you need to work until you're too old to enjoy freedom, go ahead and subscribe. Out here on the porch, we calculate the actual cost of unnecessary years at a desk instead of repeating the same "just 5 more years" advice that keeps people trapped. We're going to show you what you're really trading. Now let's talk about why 58 might be your number. Here's the metaphor I want you to think about. And this is going to sound dark, but stay with me. Imagine you're climbing a mountain, and you're doing it to get to a specific campsite at a certain elevation where you'll be safe and comfortable. You know exactly what elevation you need. Let's say it's 8,000 feet. You've calculated it. You've got the right gear for that elevation. You hit 8,000 feet at 2 p.m. Perfect. You could set up camp right now and you'd be completely fine. But instead, you keep climbing. You go to 9,000 feet, then 10,000 feet, then 11,000 feet. You're getting tired, your knees hurt, the air's getting thin. You're hauling all this gear higher and higher for no reason other than, what if I need to be higher? Meanwhile, the sun's setting. The good daylight hours you could have spent at camp enjoying the view, you spent grinding up the mountain. By the time you finally stop at 11,500 feet, you're exhausted, it's getting dark, and you've got less time to actually enjoy where you are. That's what working past your enough number looks like. Every extra year is hauling yourself higher up a mountain you don't need to climb while burning daylight you'll never get back. The retirement planning industry has convinced everyone that you need to work until 65 or 67 because that's when you get full Social Security benefits. That's when Medicare kicks in. That's when you're supposed to retire. But here's the reality check that changes everything. Those ages are arbitrary markers based on government programs, not based on what you personally need to live comfortably. Social Security at 62 versus 67 is a difference of about 30% in your monthly benefit. Sounds huge until you realize that most people who retire before 67 bridge the gap with their savings for a few years, then let their portfolio keep growing while living on reduced Social Security. The math works out almost identically in most cases. The retirement age you've been told to target has nothing to do with your actual financial situation. Let me show you what actually happens when you retire at 58 versus 65 with real numbers. Take someone who's 58 with $650,000 saved. They're spending about $50,000 annually. They could work 7 more years to 65, keep saving and retire with maybe $950,000, assuming they're adding $25,000 a year and getting modest returns. Sounds more secure, right? But here's what they're actually trading. Those 7 years from 58 to 65, they're working 2,000 hours per year. That's 14,000 hours total. That's 583 full days of work. They're trading nearly 2 full years of their waking life for an extra $300,000. Now let's see if they even need that $300,000. At 58, they've got $650,000. They need $50,000 annually to live. Social Security at 62 will give them about $24,000 annually. That's reduced benefits, but they only need to bridge from 58 to 62 with savings. Here's how the bridge years work, and this is the calculation that changes everything. Age 58 to 62 is 4 years. They need $50,000 annually with zero income. That's $200,000 total. They've got $650,000. They pull $200,000 over 4 years. At age 62, they've got roughly $450,000 left, accounting for modest growth on the money they didn't withdraw. Now Social Security kicks in at $24,000 annually. They need $50,000 to live. Gap is $26,000 that their portfolio needs to cover. At 4% withdrawal rate, they need $650,000 to safely cover that gap for 30 years. They've only got $450,000. Uh-oh, looks like they should have kept working, right? Wrong. Watch what actually happens. They withdraw $26,000 annually from $450,000. That's 5.8%, which sounds aggressive, but their portfolio historically grows at 7 to 8% annually over long periods. Even withdrawing 5.8%, the portfolio stays relatively stable or even grows in most years because market returns outpace withdrawals. By age 67, when they would have retired if they'd kept working, their portfolio is worth about $480,000 despite pulling from it for 9 years. They've lived free for 9 years and barely touched their principal. Meanwhile, the person who worked until 65 has $950,000 and 2 years of freedom. By age 75, the early retiree has been free for 17 years. Their portfolio, even with constant withdrawals, is probably worth $520,000. The person who worked until 65 has been free for 10 years and maybe $1.1 million. More money, sure, but 7 fewer years of freedom. Those 7 years from 58 to 65 are worth way more than the extra $600,000 they'll die with. But here's where this gets really critical, and this is the part nobody wants to talk about openly. Your health from 58 to 65 is not the same as your health from 75 to 82. At 58, you can hike, you can travel internationally, you can play with grandkids on the floor, you've got energy, your knees work, your back doesn't hurt every morning. By 75, maybe you're still doing those things, or maybe you're not. Maybe your knees are shot. Maybe you've got health issues that limit travel. Maybe you're on medications that make you tired. I'm not being morbidly pessimistic, I'm being realistic. The years from 58 to 65 are worth more than the years from 75 to 82 in terms of what you can actually do with them. Trading prime years for money you might not even be healthy enough to enjoy later is a terrible deal. Let's calculate what you're really trading when you work from 58 to 65. 7 years. Roughly 2,000 working hours per year, that's 14,000 hours. Assume you sleep 8 hours per day, that leaves 16 waking hours. 14,000 hours is 875 waking days. That's 2.4 years of your conscious life spent at work instead of doing literally anything else. Now let's value those hours. If you're making $75,000 annually, you're earning about $37.50 per hour. So those 14,000 hours generate $525,000 in gross income. After taxes, maybe $380,000. After continuing to pay your working expenses like commuting, work clothes, lunches out, stress spending, you're netting maybe $320,000. You traded 2.4 years of your waking life for $320,000 that you probably don't even need. Now, let me show you what happens if that same person retires at 58 and just lives carefully until Social Security kicks in. They've got $650,000. They need $50,000 annually. For 4 years until 62, they pulled $200,000. Their remaining $450,000 keeps growing. At 62, Social Security starts. They need $26,000 annually from savings to supplement. From 62 to 70, that's 8 years of $26,000 withdrawals, which is $208,000. Their portfolio started this period at $450,000. Even pulling $208,000 over 8 years, the account's probably worth $420,000 at age 70 because growth offset most of the withdrawals. Now at 70, they could switch Social Security to the higher delayed benefit if they wanted, or just keep going as they are. Either way, they've been retired for 12 years, their money's holding up fine, and they've lived an entire different life than if they'd kept working. Now, you're probably thinking, but what about health insurance from 58 to 65, before Medicare? Fair question. This is the real barrier for most people, not the money. ACA Marketplace insurance for a couple in their late 50s runs about $1,200 to $1,800 monthly, depending on the state and subsidy eligibility. That's $14,400 to $21,600 annually. Expensive? Yes, but it's not $100,000 a year. It's manageable if you've planned for it. And here's what nobody tells you. Once you retire and your income drops, you often qualify for subsidies that bring that cost way down. A couple showing $60,000 in annual income can get subsidies that drop premiums to $400 or $500 monthly in many states. So the actual barrier isn't as insurmountable as people think. It's just scary because it's unfamiliar. Let me show you that guy I mentioned who retired at 56 with $520,000. Everyone thought he was insane. He ran his numbers carefully. He needed $48,000 annually to live. He knew he'd have no income for 6 years until 62. That's $288,000 he'd pull from savings. Sounded aggressive. But he also knew his spending would drop once the mortgage was paid off at 59, down to about $42,000 annually. He pulled $48,000 yearly for 3 years, then $42,000 after that. By 62, he'd withdrawn $234,000. His portfolio had grown modestly on what remained, so he had about $440,000 left. Social Security at 62 gave him $22,000 annually. He needed $20,000 from savings to bridge the gap. At 4.5% withdrawal rate, his money should last. Now he's 68, 12 years into retirement, and his account's worth $580,000 because he withdrew conservatively and markets grew. He's been fishing, traveling, and living while his former coworkers are still grinding. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. Most people work past 58 not because they need the money, but because they're scared. Scared of running out. Scared of making a mistake. Scared of what they'll do with unstructured time. The money is an excuse to avoid confronting what retirement actually means. It's easier to say, I need 5 more years, than to admit you're terrified of leaving an identity you've had for 40 years. But here's what happens. 5 more years becomes 7. 7 becomes 9. Suddenly, you're 67, finally retiring, and the things you were going to do at 58 aren't possible anymore. You can't hike Patagonia at 67 like you could have at 58. You don't have the energy for that European backpacking trip. The window closed while you were accumulating money you'll never spend. So what does this mean if you're in your 50s wondering whether you can retire? First, run your actual bridge calculation. How many years until Social Security? How much do you need annually? Can your portfolio cover that gap? Most people find the answer is yes if they're willing to live on 70 to 80% of their working income, which is easy when you're not paying for commuting, work clothes, and stress spending. Second, price out ACA health insurance in your state. It's probably less scary than you think, especially with subsidies. Third, accept that retiring earlier with less money might be a better deal than retiring later with more. Those years from 58 to 65 are premium years. They're worth more per year than the years from 72 to 79. If you can afford to retire at 58, the math probably says you should, even if it feels scary. That woman who retired at 58 with $680,000, she's 65 now, has nearly $1 million and been living freely for 7 years. She saw her kids get married, she took that trip to Italy, she was there when her first grandchild was born. The guy who worked until 67 and died at 71 left $1 million to kids who would have traded half of it for more time with their dad while he was healthy. You can't get years back. Compounding works on money, but it doesn't work on time. Once you hit enough, every extra year at a desk is trading your life for money you don't need. Run your numbers. You might find out you've been free for years and just didn't know it. That's what we talk about out here on the porch. The math that shows you when enough is actually enough. Subscribe if you want more honest conversations about retiring earlier than you think possible, and I'll see you in the next one.